and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Maddie Dimmick, the Marketing Specialist here at Core Business Solutions. CMMC Level 1 will be required by the majority of companies in the defense industrial base. Today we will shed some light on the first level of CMMC so that you know what information needs to be protected, what requirements need to be met, and so much more. We would like to take a moment to thank our co-sponsors for promoting this event today. We have numerous MEP and PTACs, who are now known as Apex Accelerators, co-sponsoring our webinar today. Your local Apex Accelerators are available to bridge the gap between your business and the government. Apex Accelerators are here to assist you with local, state, and federal contracting. MEPs provide the tools and resources to help U.S. manufacturers succeed. Each center connects manufacturers with government agencies, universities and research facilities, and trade associations that foster growth and innovation. Contact your local Apex Accelerator or MEP for more information on how they can help your business succeed. We have two industry experts on CMMC here with us today. Scott Dawson is president of Core Business Solutions and has headed up the development of Core's cybersecurity programs for NIST, CMMC, ISO 27001, and other compliance requirements. Rick Crick is the software project manager here at Core and has been keeping up with all the latest changes and updates to CMMC to share those with you today. Thank you both for joining us here today. I think we're going to have a great time delving into this topic. First off, Scott, do you mind sharing with us a little bit of a review of CMMC for those that may be joining us today that don't really know much about CMMC?
Yeah, glad to, Maddie, and thank you for letting me join remotely today. I'm in studio. But CMMC is the coming soon Defense Department certification for all defense contractors and subcontractors that will formally certify that companies have proper cybersecurity protections in place. CMMC is not yet the law of the land. There are requirements for cybersecurity now in defense contracts that are preparation for, I guess, or in line with the certification that's coming. But the actual cybersecurity maturity model certification, otherwise known as CMMC, is not yet here, but it is all the buzz. It is what people are talking about, what people are working toward. I commend all businesses, especially small businesses, who are doing the right thing in starting to prepare. We've talked in previous webinars about the NIST 800-171 requirements that CMMC is based on, and that in today's contracts with the Defense Department, you're required to do a self-assessment based on those NIST requirements and submit a score. That's the requirement today. CMMC is yet to come. We'll talk more about the timing of that here in a bit, but there are 3 levels of certification that will be available, or should I say required, based on the contract. So based on the type of information that is being produced or exchanged with your customer or with suppliers, the nature of the information, how sensitive is going to determine which level is required in certain contracts. So if, for example, you don't handle any technical information, no drawings, no specifications, no product information of any kind, you just have a federal contract or a subcontract, but again, it's no technical information, then you're handling what they call FCI. And I know next month, Maddie, will have a webinar all about FCI and CUI. But federal contract information is general, basic information about the contract will require a level 1 certification. That's today's topic. If you handle technical information, then you'd be required to handle you to be certified to level 2 or level 3. Most likely level 2. But the overall goals are to protect the information, to have one standard for certification, not have multiple standards for certification. So if you have a contract with the Air Force and then another contract with the Army, you'd have two different things you have to do. They didn't want that. They wanted one certification to meet all the requirements. And then most importantly, the goal is to improve cybersecurity throughout the defense industrial base. The hard part of that is there are 300,000 companies that are part of the defense industrial base. So it's a big, heavy lift. So that's, I guess the last thing to point out is that when CMMC becomes real, reminds me of the Velveteen Rabbit, that book, when the bunny becomes real. But when CMMC becomes real, the certifications will be conducted by an audit company, assessment company called a C3PAO, hard to say. And those companies, those assessors, are even now, today, being prepared to conduct assessments. However, there are no CMMC assessments being conducted today. There are no CMMC certifications that are done yet, because CMMC is not, as I said, not yet the law of the land. So a lot of work is being done in preparation, and there's been work being done for the last 2 or 3 years in preparation. But CMMC is the certification of your company's cybersecurity. Just because the certification isn't here yet doesn't mean you can't put cybersecurity in place. In fact, you should put cybersecurity in place. And I commend, the group we have here today for being interested to learn about CMMC Level 1. And I'm going to cover you, Maddie, here. Hear you coughing. But yeah, so thanks for being here. We have a lot of great information to share with you. It might confirm some things you're already working on, or might change your thinking on how you're approaching CMMC, or might help you get started. Might help you think about how do we get started. So should be a good session here today.
Yeah, absolutely. We're excited to dive in. Rick, Scott kind of touched on it a little bit, but could you dive in a little bit deeper on how a company would know which CMMC level to pursue?
Yeah, and that's a great question, Maddie. And there are 3 basic considerations that you want to think about when we're looking into what level of certification you need. Once again, there's the level 1 and level 2 are the two areas. The level 1 deals with what we call the FCI, the Federal Contracting Information. The level 2 is dealing with the Controlled Unclassified Information. As Scott pointed out, the CUI is those technical requirements, those regulations, those blueprints, those diagrams, whereas the FCI is the contracts. So one of the first things you want to think about is, what type of information are we going to handle within our organization? Are we just going to be handling those contracts and not the technical information, or are we going to do both? So that would be your first consideration, trying to figure out what we're going to do moving forward. The second area that you want to look at is your workflow. You want to identify, how do we do our work today? Who are the individuals within my organization that will be handling these various types of information? And that's going to be important to distinguish, because that helps us form the third part here, which is our boundaries. What's the scope of our engagement here for cybersecurity? Does it include the entire network? Do I have an on-premise solution? In other words, am I using computers and servers on our site, or are we doing virtually cloud, implementation? So a virtual solution. So once again, You want to look at what my boundaries are. I will tell you from an assessment perspective, the smaller your boundaries or scope, the better off you'll be in that assessment process.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Rick. Scott, do you have anything you wanted to contribute to that? Anything added on?
No, I think Rick is spot on with the scope issue. If a company, let's say, only has one or two contracts related to defense contract, so it's a minority or a small part of their business. In order to comply with CMMC requirements, whether it's level 1 or level 2, doesn't really matter. But in order to comply, it'd be conceivably less expensive and less troublesome if fewer people and fewer computers are involved. Just think of the logic of that. So if it were me, I would consider whether I could narrow down the scope and then prepare those people and those computers to be ready for the CMMC audit or assessment. I think it's really important to think about that. And then if you can't, but if your company primarily does defense work, and a lot of people in your organization touch or handle these files or drawings or contracts, it's kind of the general, everybody needs access kind of thing. Then you should be looking at raising your cybersecurity over your entire network, because it'll be your whole network that gets audited, and it'll be your whole company that gets I should say assessed. I know that there's a terminology issue here, but that is I'm going to say it this way: that's not a technical decision; it's a management decision as to I'll say the strategy of preparing for CMMC. There are other ways to simplify. There are other ways to keep it affordable. This thing's going to be expensive enough when it comes out. So that's something I know Rick and our security team here have been focusing the last 2 years on, is where's the easy button in all this? Is there such a thing? Can there be such a thing? How do we help small businesses tackle this highly complicated issue of cybersecurity, and then on top of that, assessments and certification? So today and this whole year, our series on CMMC, every month we'll be diving in to ways in which to understand the requirements, ways in which to apply the requirements in such a way that will prepare you for the assessment, the right assessment to the right level, and while cybersecurity is absolutely critical to any business, it's critical to any computer, to any information. If you want to take a narrow view of this and say, yeah, we believe in cybersecurity, but OMG, this thing is complicated. This thing could be expensive. Maybe it's more than your company can handle. Then narrowing it down is important, and simplifying is important. And maybe as time goes on, you might deploy some of these things over your entire network. But I'm not suggesting one way is right, one way is wrong. I'm just saying, absolutely, there are options, and educating yourself is important. And this webinar series this year, I think, is going to be eye-opening for small businesses. And couldn't believe, Maddie, you told us the signups for today. It's pretty amazing. So there's a lot of people interested in this. And I suggest you mark your calendars and stay tuned and get educated this year. And we're going to give you guys a perspective that will make this practical, make this realistic for your organization in today's part of it to start. So I got a little off topic, Maddie, but I get passionate about this because it's so important that small businesses handle this in a way that is reasonable, and because you really don't want to just get disqualified from doing work with the defense industry over this thing. So we're here to help, and we're glad to be providing this training for folks. And we're learning every day. Every single day we're learning, and we'll continue to do so, trying to stay on top of it. But our take on it is always going to be, I'm going to use a little pun here. It's probably not meant to be this way, in defense of the small business to handle these really difficult things. And we will simplify it for you guys, I promise.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for mentioning all of that, Scott. So I guess a big question a lot of people have, probably it's on a lot of your minds. Rick, can you tell us why CMMC Level 1 is important for defense contractors today?
Sure, be happy to. The Level 1 is made up of 17 controls. Level 2 has 110. So it's important to understand that your Level 1 controls, the 17, are also part of the 110. So as you're working on those 17, sometimes referred to as your basic cyber hygiene, you're also working on that Level 2 because they're part of that Level 2 that you will be implementing. So as you go through that, know that you're actually doing two things at one time. You're preparing yourself if in the future you would have that controlled unclassified information. And once again, remember that FCI is basically dealing with contracts. And we'll talk a little bit more about what those elements are. But know that it's important. These are the basic cyber hygiene at a very minimum. Everyone should have these 17 controls handled within the organization, whether or not they're working with DoD or not. They just make common sense.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a question here too, asking I'm assuming if CMMC Level 1 is only for small businesses working with the DoD. So does this just apply to small businesses or larger businesses? No,
it's applied to anybody. Those 17 controls, once again, are focused on the contracting information. So don't want to get too far down in the weeds here. But what some organizations do is they have two different groups within their organization. I might have some administrative people, business side, that all they deal with is the FCI, the contracting information. They don't deal with the CUI, the controlled unclassified information. So they segregate their system so that anybody that's signed into this system has lesser amount of controls because they're only dealing with the contracting information, and the other group that are dealing with the prints and so forth, we have to apply all 110. So they can kind of segregate that and split their network up into two groups, if you will.
Absolutely.
But Maddie, it's not really a size issue. It's all about the information being handled.
Right.
Yeah.
And it eventually, when CMMC is official, the contracts will specify which level is required for bids to be submitted for that contract. So it'll be more clear once this is deployed. Right now, the best thing you have to go on is if you're doing work with the DoD today, are you handling any technical information at all? If you're in manufacturing, you probably handle technical information. If you're a manufacturer, because you probably need drawings and other test data and those kind of things. That's all CUI. Again, next month we're going to dive into that more. But if you're not handling anything technical, but you still have a contract with a defense contractor, say a prime or whatever, then any contract information that is exchanged is the information that needs to be protected with the 17 controls that we talked about today. So you could be a big company or a small company, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Depends on the contract you pursue and the information that's then used as part of executing that contract. So it's not size related at all. Good question.
Yeah, that's great. So I guess we can move into the exact requirements, or we'll kind of do a general overview of the requirements, not get too far into the weeds. But Scott, could you start us off with the overview of the 17 controls?
Yeah, and Maddie, as we do this, we're going to handle this more topical, rather than control by control.
Yeah.
You guys can download the NIST requirement and look up the 17 controls. But
where can they find that? Someone was asking where they could find those specific controls.
Yeah, good question, Rick. Where are those indicated? Can we maybe send something out, Maddie,
We can
afterwards?
send something out. Yeah.
On that?
Yeah,
Yeah, we'll do that. Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah, they would be in the FARS clause. I think it's 52.204, 21, if I remember correctly. They're called the basic safeguards. That's also in the CMMC Level 1 L1 guide.
On the CMMC website, right?
On the
Rick,
CMMC website. Yep.
Yeah, Maddie, let's look that up and promise to send it to everybody afterwards.
Someone
Okay.
said the Cyber AB website. Is that
Yeah.
correct? Or
You can get it
Yeah,
there,
that's right.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but we'll send a link to everybody.
Yep, I'll send a link.
But today is our approach on this, because the terminology, you can get hung up in the terminology and the wording of these things, and when our consultants, for example, work with our customers, we explain one by one and dive into the specific assessment requirements related to the 17 controls, so that we can help and do help our customers at a detail level. Today is more orientation, so I apologize if you guys are looking for line by line instructions. That wasn't what we were planning to do. But I want to look at this diagram. X, I think you probably have it up already. And this is a way to look at the 17 practices. This diagram is intended to show that there is information being protected. That's the arrows that go around, and it's being protected in 4 different ways. So it's being protected on your network. You would expect, right? The network that you're accessing or saving information on, in this case, FCI. So imagine you get an email with the contract information, and now you got to save it somewhere. It's in a folder, probably on your network, and it's being transmitted through your network connections, wirelessly or wired, or in the cloud. And so that network needs to be protected, and there are specific requirements for your network. Some of the 17 are related to the network. Secondly, there are some requirements related to people, because people are the ones who are reading the information. They're the ones creating the documentation, perhaps. They're the ones who are organizing or replying to information that's being requested. And the way in which people handle that information is important. Thirdly, endpoints. Endpoint is a term that refers to the devices that are connected to the network that are at the end. At the endpoint. So like your laptop, I'm on a laptop here today. Your phone, if you were to look something up on your phone, there's my phone. If you had a tablet, if you have a desktop computer, I generally say if it has a screen and a keyboard, it's probably an endpoint. That's not scientifically true, but generally. So those devices that we all handle and view information on need to be protected. And then fourthly, there are requirements for the facility, for the work environment that that your computers are in and that your people are in. So those 4 areas there are requirements for each, and we're going to dive into them. So Rick, let's dive into that first one, and I'm going to quiz you.
Sure.
Quiz the expert here. So let's talk about the network. So, Rick, what are some of the controls or practices related to the network? Can you just kind of touch on those, get people familiar with some of the technical issues and terminology there?
Sure. So I think one of the biggest things is access, controlling your access to this FCI. It would be like a username and passwords. It would be only those authorized individuals that have a need to see that would have access. So not only users, but we're talking about devices that might interact with it, controlling what those devices might be. It's talking about monitoring your network, making sure that you're looking for any suspicious activities that are happening across your network. So constantly keeping an eye on that, making sure that things like your antivirus are up to date and that it's active as you move forward. So those are some ways that you can protect your network where this information resides. The biggest thing is segregating the access to it, making sure that only those individuals that need access to that can have access to it. A good thing to do would be a multi-factor authentication beyond the username and password. Helps to secure that a little bit more.
Yeah, great run through, Rick. These network protections are generally technology related.
Mm-hmm.
They require technical expertise. Often your IT person or MSP could implement these particular controls on your network. The thing to be aware of is that they have to be done properly. They have to be done in a way that can be audited. And they will be scrutinized for certification. So these are technical things on your network. So now let's go to the second area, the people protection. Rick, what are some things that we have to be preparing with regard to people who access and use the information?
I think one of the biggest things is to train the individuals on their responsibility, their role, understanding how they need to protect that. There's policies that would be in place. That they would need to understand the policies. So just overall good training, cyber training for employees so they can recognize, once again, the importance of being careful as they access this information and who they can share that information with and who they can't share the information with. All that is very important. So being aware of your surroundings. If there's guests in the facility, you want to be cognizant of what you're putting on your screen, and all that's part of the training and the awareness that you have information that you just don't want everybody to see. So that's that's a big liability there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and in order to make this security process work, you have to not only consider technical things, but you got to consider the users, the people. And Rick, it's not just the things on a screen. It could be things on a desk or on out in the production environment on paper.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be aware that this information could be in different formats, and that's where the training comes into play.
Yep.
That anybody who has access to information, say it this way, who's permitted to access information, needs to be properly trained and understand the rules, and then follow the rules. So the training will be part of the assessment. There's part of the assessment is you have to have records of the training, and it has to be documented, and there has to be policies and things like that. So it's not just a, hey, we met in the conference room and we made an announcement and now we're trained. You'll have to have more in-depth training evidence to show compliance for CMMC. All right, so that brings us then to the third bucket, which is endpoint protection. Now we're back to the technical. So we're bouncing between the technical side and the people side. So we're on the technical side again. Specifically, Rick, with regard to the devices we all use to access and view the information, what do we have to think about with regard to endpoints?
Yeah, so what would be in scope there would be things like we've mentioned before, your laptops, any kind of computers would be within scope here. It could be basically any device that is connected to your network that would interact with this FCI would be in scope here. It could be, your routers and your switches and your printers and, kind of going back a little bit with the people thing. If I print something out, make sure you go to the printer and get it. Don't just leave it lay there. So that's how that device is within scope here. So any of the tools or technical equipment that you might have would be what it's talking about, the endpoint here. Could be servers as well.
Yeah, what kind of requirements then apply to those devices? I mean, how do those need to be secured?
So how you protect those is, number one, you want to make sure that they have the latest patches on those. Once again, that you are reviewing the audit logs. For example, servers produce audit logs. And so you want to make sure that only the proper devices were accessing a server, or you want to be monitoring computers or laptops or cell phones or whatever the device is that you're interacting, to make sure that people aren't trying to get in inappropriately, that they're trying to hack a password or username. So there's a whole monitoring those devices, the communication that's happening there on your network. You want to be monitoring that between devices and so forth. That can give you a lot of clues there.
Yeah, good summary there, Rick. On endpoints, I think another piece is an endpoint device could, when it's needs to be replaced or disposed of, there you have to be aware of the information still on the laptop. It's still on the thumb drive. What do we have to think about when something reaches end of life?
Yeah, end of life, you want to make sure you sanitize them. And there's a lot of different ways to sanitize devices, i.e. thumb drives, hard drives. Definitely, there's techniques out there that are used for hard drives. Anything from just deleting all the information, taking a strong magnet over it, some more secure things, fill the hard drive up with ones and zeros. It just depends to what extent. But the key here is to make sure that that information that was on that thumb drive or hard drive is not retrievable. If it is hard copies, that's another thing to think about. If I have a printed copy, you might want to shred that. You don't want to just fold it up, throw it in your waste can, goes out the door, and people do dumpster diving and try to find information that way.
Right.
So you want to make sure that, while we're talking here about these equipment, you also have hard copies of this stuff that may or may not be utilized within your organization, and you have to make sure that's destroyed properly as well.
Well, the other thing is, Rick, you're alluding to the fact that there are different ways to handle these different things. So there's no one size fits all.
Correct.
There's no one way to do it. And whatever approach or process you decide upon then needs to be documented in written policies so that you can train everybody and hold everybody accountable to these restricted methods. So there's kind of a sequence there of understanding what's needed, choosing the right approach, writing the policies, implementing those policies, and training the people as well. And then the fourth area is facilities. A couple of things to keep in mind with regard to protecting the facility. Rick, go ahead and comment on those.
Yeah, so facilities, securing your facility is really critical. Making sure that you have locked doors, maybe it's a keypad, maybe it's a key card, finger scans, whatever it might be, so that you're controlling who has access to your facility. And then beyond that, having some kind of a login process, a ledger where individuals that are coming in as a guest or even to work on your equipment, where they have to log in and you keep track of that. And then when they leave your facility, you want to keep track of that as well. So people coming in and leaving, and keeping a log of that, because once again, you want to review that or audit that from time to time to make sure that people are doing the right things, so that you know who has access to your facility. In case there's an issue that comes up, you know who's been there, and so you can really do some investigation if needed. But once again, very important to secure your facility and maybe restrict areas. Always have an escort. You should have an escort policy as part of that, that you just don't want somebody off the street roaming around. For manufacturing, sometimes that can be a challenge if you have a shipping area that's wide open. And so it will be to educate your employees. That goes back to the training. You see somebody coming in, hey, have you logged in? Might be a pain to do that, but once again, by educating your employees the importance of that, will help them, support the policies that you put in place for that.
Yeah, excellent. So as you guys are, I think, gathering at this point, these are fairly basic security practices that are subject to the assessment for certification, and carefully need to be thought through in terms of what's a practical way to deal with these things within our organization. Does everyone and all of our computers need to be a part of this? Or could we separate out a smaller scope and then implement these policies there? It's, level 1 protections are very basic, and level 1 protections are good for any company and any network in any situation. But you may choose to start small and nail that down so that your FCI information is within the bubble, I'll say, okay? And then roll it out further within your organization. But you might decide it's better. Let's just go ahead and bite the bullet and everything and it can be included. So it's not saying one way is right, one way is wrong. But there are some decisions to be made as you pursue it. And you're going to have to secure your network. You're going to have to train your people. You're going to have to update and maintain your devices. There are some facility requirements that are part of this as well. That's really what the 17 practices are about. And we'll send a link to the CMMC AV website where you guys can read the details.
Yeah. We have a couple questions that kind of pertain to the topic we're talking about right now. So someone asked, what if you work from home, and you're the only person at the company, and all information is non-technical and online?
All right, Mr. Rick, take that one.
Gotta keep you guys on your toes.
That is a great question that has been batted around many times. Once again, it all comes down to what kind of information are you handling? Is it FCI or CUI? The basic rule of thumb, I would say, is be cognizant of your surrounding. If I know I'm going to be looking at FCI in particular or CUI, I need to make sure that I'm not in an open environment where anybody can walk by and observe what I'm doing. And that would go for at your home, you know. Just be cognizant of your surrounding. Now the DOD might have more stringent there, but I'm taking a common sense approach here. You know, that just make sure that you're protecting it in that environment. Make sure that if you're not at home, you're not using public Wi-Fi that can be easily hacked. So there are certain things that you'll want to guard against as you're doing that. But my recommendation...
But I would say, Rick, if I could just add to that.
Sure.
If in that scenario that the person who raised the question brought in, if they're working from home, and that's the only place that the information is being utilized, then guess what? Your home computer is in scope. And so then these requirements apply there. And those, you know, controls on endpoints and training and such need to be implemented on your home computer. The facility issue that Rick talked about. But the other thing I heard in the question is this information might just be publicly available. I'm only dealing with information that is available to the general public. That is not what they mean by FCI. And again, next month we're going to dive into it more. But FCI is information that is not available to the public.
Correct.
But related to the contract. So your signed contract and maybe scheduling the schedule of your contract and maybe correspondence related to the execution of the contract, that's not out on a website somewhere. So there's private information that isn't out in the public, but it's related to the contract. That's FCI. That's what we're talking about. It's really fuzzy to sort out because it starts with the information. It absolutely starts with what information am I handling and protecting, and then from there you build a plan regarding which level and how do I protect it properly and such. So tune in next month. We'll dive into FCI land a little bit more.
Yeah. Thank you to the both of you for answering that. So moving on, a lot of people have questions on the timeline. We even have a couple questions in Q&A. I'm sure lots of people are curious about the government saying this March or May date. Rick, what does the CMMC timeline currently look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. Once again, they keep a close tab on that, if you will. They don't disclose much information because they're still in that process of reviewing the information. The timeline initially was March for the final ruling to come down. And then the seeing in contracts originally was May. That's been pushed back. The latest I've heard was June, July. But once again, we're guessing about that. We haven't heard officially anything about that yet. I've heard people say we're getting close. And once again, it's hard to define what close is. You know, so once again, it's something that's coming. You want to prepare as soon as you can. You don't want to wait till after the fact and be caught short if a contract comes out. But once again, you know, it could be till you see it rolled out in contracts 2024. Once again, we're waiting to hear that information from the DoD. Scott, thoughts?
Yeah, I would add a couple things there, Rick. The DoD had a lot of timeline objectives for the release of these new regulations. And so up until recently, there was a lot of announcements and webinars and articles and such that were coming directly from the source, which was the Department of Defense, that we've all been hearing these dates, which were the goals, I'll say it this way, that the DoD has had. It's been more complicated than they wanted it to be, even within the DoD, to get things finalized, get the wording right, all that. But once the DoD gets things, gets to a certain point, they then need other parts of the government to, I'll say, put the stamp on it and get it out the door. So it's not up to the DoD to release a regulation. That's a different part of the government in order to make these legally binding. And so then the DoD submits their proposed rule to, I think it's the Office of OMB, Office of Management Budget or something. Somebody can type in the chat there, Maddie, to you what the name of it is. But it has to go through another avenue, another layer of bureaucracy to get final approval and release it to make it legally, contractually binding. And that step has brought a different point of view from the government as to whether this is something that should be released in 23 or it needs more scrutiny and would be released in 24. During this time for the government, it's a quiet period. They've got it locked down. No one can announce anything at this point. No one can answer any questions at this point. So the only timing chatter, I don't know if that's right to say, that you're hearing are people prognosticating about the timeline. And what is likely to happen is they're likely to release things on this date or that date. Then you have vendors who are, well, this is going to sound really negative, but I don't mean it that way. There are vendors who have products they're trying to sell and get people to buy right now. And so they're putting a little more hype on the thing about it's urgent and such. That being said, Rick's right. This is something to get started on. This is something to learn about, choose your path. If you need a partner to help, get your partner on board. If you need to have a technology plan, get your technology plan in place. Get started on deploying these controls so that you're ready, and you have a track record. By the time the assessment, requirements come out, you're ready because you've already been doing it. And so that's our message. We're not trying to create hype here. We're trying to give you guys the simple truth and keep you informed. As the year progresses, we'll keep our ear to the ground and all that and give you guys the latest information as the year progresses. But, I would say if it were me, I'd want to get things in place this year. And level one's not that big of a lift. It's not that complicated. If you're anticipating only handling FCI, it's not that complicated. It's good to get it in place, get used to doing it within your organization, get used to the policies. I think that's the common sense thing to do. But, choose a path that is reasonable and affordable and sustainable for your business.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll put some hype in here. A little pitch, because it's Core Business Solutions offering the training. We do offer this kind of help. We do have, options for you to consider. contact us if you'd like to explore that further. Because, like I say, small businesses in particular need to be careful to do this in a way that can be funded properly, because it can be expensive, and maintained long term, because presumably you're going to want to keep doing defense work for years to come.
Yeah.
So you'll have to keep these things in place. So,
Yeah.
all right, enough of my sales pitch. That's my sales pitch for today.
Yeah. So I know a lot of another big question a lot of you probably have is the cost. Scott, can you kind of go over just pretty briefly, kind of quickly? You said that CMMC Level 1 isn't that heavy of a lift. What are some costs that people can expect?
Yeah, it's not 110 requirements, it's 17. So in comparison, it's a bargain.
Yeah.
But it's more than you're doing today. So therefore, it's going to cost something. So what do we have to consider there? Well, it depends on what you have in place now. Because if you already have a number of these things in place now, maybe you have to tweak them a bit. Then it's not that expensive because you already have these things. But things you need to consider is with level 1, it looks like there won't be third-party assessments. Yay. If I were handling FCI and I need level 1, I'd be thrilled that I don't have a third-party assessor showing up at my door. Okay? However, you have to do self-assessments that are legally binding, and you have to ensure that the 17 practices are in place. So having a practice annually, I think, Rick, it's annual that the self-assessments have to be done.
Correct.
Get started like an ISO internal audit. Okay, think of it that way. So you're going to have time to do assessments. You have to have the right people or resource to do the assessment, somebody who's qualified to do the assessment. It shouldn't be the people running your network assessing themselves, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So assessments, there's time and money involved in planning this out. There's time and money involved in the technology, in the training, in the writing of policies and procedures. I would equate it to like an ISO implementation.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not quite as big as that, but it's along those lines. You're likely to spend money on upgrading IT systems, computers, devices, maybe rearranging some things in your facility to cut down on the visitor traffic or whatever. Isolate some people in a more segregated way so that their information is better protected. So it might be some things like that. Then if it's really technical, you're starting from zero, and you've got to really put some of these technologies in place, you're probably going to need help from somebody with an IT background or an MSP, or you looked for a different approach, which would be a place secure in the cloud, that you could keep all your FCI. That's another option, by the way. You could say, we're not going to secure our network. We're going to put our information in a segregated system in the cloud, and it's going to be secured there. And again, there's a scope type of things, of different ways to do it. But then you got to have the right provider of that cloud platform, who can maintain these requirements. So these are the kinds of things, Maddie, that are going to be involved in a budget. I wish I could tell everybody it costs $250, or whatever, pick a number. But it's very situational. But I think there are common sense ways to go about it that could keep the budget under control.
Yeah. And definitely what Rick said earlier about your scope and your boundaries, right? Limiting that helps the budget, right?
Absolutely.
That's for sure. Yeah. If it would work for you. Yeah. If it would work for you. Because if everybody needs access, then you're not narrowing your scope.
Yeah. True.
A definition. If a few people need access, you could take a different way to do it. And again, commercial time. Core Business Solutions can probably help you guys through that planning process.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, both of you. We'll move in to a Q&A section. We have a lot of good questions, so we won't be able to get to them all, but we will email you and send you the answers to the questions that we don't get to. But I think here's one that a lot of people have on their mind. If you guys could just touch base on it a little bit, if you can sum it up in a concise way. But someone asked, will level 1 need a SPURS score?
Okay, Rick, go for it, man.
No, my understanding that it will not be a SPURS score. Once again, when CMMC gets approved, you will get a level 1 certification, or a it's not a certification in that you're going to be assessed, but you'll be a level 1. That means you have all 17 controls in place. Same with the CUI level 2. You will get a level 2 designation, not a point system, because once again, you have to have all the controls in place in order to have a level 2. So it's my understanding that methodology in EMAS is where they're going to be storing this is a little bit different than what you see with the NIST 171, where you actually put a score in there.
Yeah, Rick, I look at it this way, and I could be completely wrong. I've been wrong 3 times today. This could be my 4th time. That the SPURS score methodology was a stopgap prior to the release of formal certification. So SPURS score allows you to get a B or a C on the test, and you still pass.
Right.
You can have, you don't have to have a perfect score. Certification's different. You have to have 100% to pass. And it would be, logical to think that the SPURS submission of scores is going to go away because certification means you have all the controls in place. So I haven't heard that officially, but I think, Rick, you're alluding to the fact that it might be. But since there's only 17 practices, the SPURS score is just designed around 110 practices. So even then, I would say it's going to be replaced. That being said, in today's contracts, the only thing that's there is SPURS score against 110 for everybody, which is kind of wonky. All right, I'm giving my opinion. That's an official thing. It's wonky because if I'm only handling FCI, why am I having to do a SPURS score? I don't know who you call to complain about that. I don't know if they're picking up their phone at this point, but it's a little bit wonky right now. The rules are going to change when the new regulations come out, and we'll get clarity then. I guess is the best way to say it.
So another way to look at it too, Scott, is that if I'm only dealing with the 17 and I had all 17 in place, the highest score I could get is around a negative 140. So think of that. You haven't even hit, with the SPURS. You haven't hit 0 yet.
Yeah. If you add up all the points using the SPURS methodology on the 17, it's like 61 or 62. Rick, something like that.
Yeah.
If you just add up the points.
Yep, 63 points.
63. So that's your goal. Get all 63. That's using, again, the weighting system from SPURS.
Right.
But, but regardless, nail down the 17 and you'll be prepared. That's the drill. Any other quick questions we can take, Maddie?
Yeah, I think this one's a pretty quick one. Does this apply to other federal agencies or just the DoD?
Right now, it's DoD only.
Okay.
Well, right now, it's DoD getting ready to release.
Yeah.
So in some ways, it's not even DoD yet. But DoD is the only department that I've heard is working on a regulation. But I've also heard other departments of the government interested in doing something like this or following suit or utilizing the same certification if this is successful. But I think it's a wait and see for the rest of the government at this point, because I think they want to see if it's going to work out. With the 300,000 companies It's a small little sample, right? Small
Yeah.
little test that they're running
Yeah.
with over a 250,000 companies involved.
Yes, well, thank you both. There are a bunch of other questions, but we don't have time to get to them all. Again, we will email you with those answers. So be on the lookout for that. We will also be emailing you out the recording of this presentation so you can watch it again and pick up on any information that you might have missed. But we want to thank you for joining us today as we discuss CMMC Level 1 and what you should do now to prepare. I'm hopeful that you feel more confident in your understanding of CMMC Level 1 and that you feel better equipped to take the necessary steps to get your business ready for these DoD requirements. Members of our consulting team are available to help you better prepare for CMMC. Our experts are able to help you lay out a plan for CMMC and get your sensitive information secured. If you're interested in more information about our CMMC programs for small business, please contact us at info@thecoresolution.com. Thank you again to all of our co-sponsors for promoting today's webinar and taking part in sharing this important information about cybersecurity to keep businesses safe from cyber criminals and all of our sensitive government data safe. I would also like to take a moment to share some more information about Apex Accelerators. Apex Accelerators, again, build a bridge between businesses and government. They're funded by federal and state sources, and they have all over the country. They have 94 centers and approximately 630 counselors. Here's a specific map for the PA Apex Accelerators that you can see. They also assist with vendor registrations and certifications, identifying government markets, post-award contract performance, and so much more. And then, as you know, or might have noticed, PTAX, they used to be PTAX, but have changed to Apex Accelerators. This happened November 2022 because of a new funding source happening from the DoD Office of Small Business and Development. But they serve the same services, they have the same services to the same clients and communities. You can find your local Apex Accelerator at aptac.us.org, and here are some contacts to get in touch with your local PTAC, Apex Accelerators. So be in contact with your local Apex Accelerators or MEPs. Finally, next month, we will be having a discussion on FCI and CUI, what it is and how to protect it. This presentation will cover information about the sensitive information that is FCI and CUI. Please join us on Thursday, March 16th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time to learn more about CMMC. As we wrap up, I want to thank you again for joining us today. Stay safe and let us know if you have any questions from today's session or would like more information about any of our CMMC programs. Take care.